meeting over now to Jason Wright to go ahead and give us an update on things that are happening in Washington, D.C. without the state.
I don't know what to do with it, so I did have a video that we'll show, so thanks for the senator.
Well, I just want to thank all of y'all for being here. And you know what? I'm not too dismayed at all that it's a smaller crowd, because I got to tell y'all, I remember back whenever I called a friend of mine in Houston, Texas. I was trying to raise money for another race. And just so that y'all know, this is the first time I've ever worked for you, the taxpayer, in my life, is whenever I went to work for Senator Ted Cruz. And I called this buddy up in Houston, and we were discussing another race that was going on. He said, I'm not real interested in that race. I'm trying to get my friend Ted Cruz elected Attorney General. And like so many other people back then, I said, well, who in the heck is Ted Cruz? And he told me. And I said, well, if you're that strong behind him, then I guess I should be. I said, give him my contact information, have him or his people get in touch with me, and we'll get him plugged in East Texas. I remember the first breakfast I ever held for him over in Tyler, we had about 10 people show up. And one of the things that I've watched through this entire progression, that guy back then who was just a candidate I'd never heard of, but was learning about, and later figured out everything he was all about, and decided that I wanted to get behind him full force to do what little I could to help him become our senator. I've never seen him change. It didn't matter if he was talking to 10 people, 12 people, or now like what we usually see him talking to, thousands of people. He is every bit as enthusiastic, every bit as passionate, every bit as concerned about discussing freedom, liberty, the fight for the Constitution and the defense of it. None of that has ever changed. And I remember he taught me something, because at the time I was a city councilman in Tyler, and I remember that first meeting, I sat there, I was like, what in the world is he going to talk about to this small little group of people? This ought to finish up pretty quick. And I tell y'all, that room, it could just as well have 150 people in it. And so I'm just as encouraged that we have a small group here tonight to find out about what the senator's doing in Washington for us in representing all 27 million Texans as our United States Senator. Now, just to give you a little bit of, because this can be kind of confusing right now with mine and Daniel's boss doing what he is. We work for you. We are supporters of his in the job that he already has, which is our United States Senator. Daniel back there is the East Texas Regional Director. I'm the State Field Director, and essentially what that is that means that I go from every corner of the state, top to bottom, left and right, because with the senator, even if he were not running for president, whenever you're a senator in the state of Texas, you're pretty well outnumbered, 27 million to 1. And you got a lot of ground to cover. And we've got an active and boisterous and opinionated state. And one of the things that Senator Ted Cruz absolutely demands is that our constituents are heard, responded to, taken care of, and it does not matter. It doesn't matter if they're in Hidalgo or Houston or San Antonio or Brownsville or McAllen or Mission. And I've been to all of them. I get to go to some real exotic locations. But that's what he demands. He wants to make sure that every Texan is properly represented and they're heard from, and he wants to make sure he does the right job on behalf of you in fighting for making sure that your needs are met and you're properly represented at your federal government. Now, what I want to show you is kind of a look back on what the senator did legislatively in the past year. And obviously, he would much rather be here. And again, he would be just as excited with this size group or if he packed it out. Now, I have a feeling if it had said Ted Cruz instead of Jason Wright, we might have had a bigger crowd, but I'm not going to take offense to that because y'all are my diehard fans. Y'all knew I was coming. Y'all saw, oh, that's Jason Wright. That's that guy. Okay. So thank y'all. Y'all will forever hold a very special place in my heart. So what I want to do is give you this message that the senator did prepare for all the folks of Texas on kind of a look back on what he fought for and what he did in the legislature. And then we'll talk a little bit further about kind of what's going on and a look ahead for the upcoming legislative session, and then maybe take some questions after that. So are we ready for that video of the senators?
Is Just 1 second.
It's the right title. It's in that part.
But you're in great hands with my staff.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm fortunate to have an extraordinary group of individuals who joined me in dedication to serving the great state of Texas. When I was elected in 2012, I promised all Texans that if you sent me to Washington, I wouldn't simply go along to get along. I wouldn't do what the lobbyists and what Republican leadership just told me to do. Instead, I'd stand up and fight for them. After all, they weren't the ones who elected me, you were. And my number one responsibility as your senator is to serve you and all of the 27 million citizens in our great state. In my time serving as your senator, I'm proud to say that I have kept my promise to fight against the Washington cartel, those politicians and lobbyists who get in bed with special interests to grow and grow and grow government and their own pocketbooks at the expense of hardworking families across Texas and America. Today, I'd like to share for you 3 of the most important issues we faced in Washington over the last year. The reason I've chosen each of these to discuss is because they all share the common theme of advancing liberty and protecting our nation. And achieving this doesn't require relying on government bureaucrats, rather the ingenuity and can-do attitude of Texans just like you. One of the great privileges that I have serving in the Senate is that I'm the chairman of the Subcommittee of Space, Science, and Competitiveness on the Senate Commerce Committee. And in that role, I introduced the U.S. Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act, which recently passed both houses of Congress and was signed into law by President Obama. This bipartisan, bicameral legislation extends the operation of the International Space Station until 2024, providing mission certainty for Houston's Johnson Space Center. Additionally, we prohibit federal regulations on the commercial space industry for 7.5 years, the longest such extension in our country's history. This allows the commercial space sector to continue to mature, experiment, innovate, and demonstrate readiness. Another key component of this legislation is establishing property rights beyond the Earth and throughout the cosmos. This legislation helps establish certainty and the environment for growth for a burgeoning industry in which a single asteroid could net trillions of dollars in platinum and other rare earth metals. It will have a positive impact on communities throughout the state, from Central Texas to West Texas, to South Texas, and of course to Houston, as the commercial space industry continues to grow. Additionally, on the commercial space side, we're all very proud that the Ellington Airport became the 10th U.S. airport and the second in Texas after Midland to be licensed by the FAA as a commercial spaceport. Not only is this a well-deserved distinction, but it provides a perfect example of how Texas continues to lead the way in space for the 21st century. The next thing I'd like to discuss is the need for regulatory reform. My number one priority in the Senate since day one has been economic growth. And the reason is simple. Economic growth is foundational to every other challenge we have, whether it is turning around unemployment or raising the stagnant median wages, whether it is finally tackling and turning around our debt and deficit so that we are no longer bankrupting our kids and grandkids, whether it is rebuilding our military to address the reality that the world has gotten to be a much more dangerous place, or whether it is reforming Social Security to strengthen and preserve that vital bulwark of our society. With growth, we can do all of that. Without growth, we can't do any of it. And when it comes to regulatory reform, every one of you deals with the growing burdens from the alphabet soup of regulatory agencies in Washington. If we want to unchain growth, we pull back the oppressive regulations from the EPA, the CFPB, the Department of Labor, all of Washington that is crushing jobs. And we unchain small businesses that generate 2/3 of all new jobs. In the area of economic growth, I think there is no better place to start than energy. For this reason, I reintroduced legislation in the Senate called the American Energy Renaissance Act. It is the most comprehensive, the most aggressive, the broadest energy legislation submitted in Congress. It would dramatically reduce the federal barriers that hinder the private sector from generating jobs. Importantly, it would also end the war on coal. If we get the federal government out of the way, the American energy renaissance that we're experiencing has the potential to generate millions of high-paying jobs. And not just jobs in the energy sector, but we can bring back manufacturing. We can bring back heavy manufacturing, bring back industries like the steel industry, and compete with foreign nations like China, not based on low-cost labor. Lord knows we don't want to compete based on low-cost labor, but to compete based on abundant energy resources God has given us here at home. That's the kind of leadership I believe we need in Washington. That's the kind of leadership that is my hope that we will see in both houses of Congress, focusing on common sense policy to bring back jobs and growth and opportunity. And the last issue I want to discuss with you is the issue of illegal immigration. This year I introduced Kate's Law, a bill named for Kate Steiner, the 32-year-old woman who tragically died in the arms of her father on a San Francisco pier after being shot by an illegal alien who had multiple felony convictions and had been deported from the United States 5 times. This bill imposes a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence on any alien who illegally re-enters the country after having been convicted of an aggravated felony or 2 prior illegal re-entry offenses. This class of illegal aliens has a special disdain and disregard for our nation's laws. And all too often, these offenders have serious rap sheets. Americans are tired of seeing their laws flouted and their communities plagued by the horrible crime that typically accompanies illegal immigration. But for too long, the pleas of the American people on this issue have gone unheeded here in Washington. We must send the message that defiance of our laws will no longer be tolerated. The problem of illegal immigration in this country will never be solved until we demonstrate to the American people that we are serious about securing the border and enforcing our immigration laws. This bill is a small step, but it's a meaningful step in the right direction. Alas, right now, Washington Democrats are blocking this bill, but mark my words, we will pass Kate's Law. If Washington will listen a little less to the lobbyists with big checkbooks and a little more to hardworking Americans like you, I'm confident the change that we've been striving for will come much faster. Thank you for everything you're doing, and God bless you.
I think the biggest takeaway from that is that, and I get this a lot, whenever we go around and I'm talking about Senator Cruz, and y'all can imagine, very early on, Senator Cruz became a national figure. And so he became the topic of conversation very quickly. He was different than a lot of senators. And people would pull me aside because they knew that I knew him personally before I knew him in a professional capacity going to work for him. I said, okay, what is his deal? What is Ted Cruz really about? I said, it's really simple, and this is straight from the senator's mouth. There are 3 things that he's constantly focused on as our senator: less spending, tax reform, and lower regulations. Like what he said in the video, as a matter of legislation, he firmly believes that if we can get our economic house in order, if we can get growth back in America, if we can get jobs back to a functioning, robust state, then a lot of these other problems that we have facing us, we can much more readily tackle them. So he's constantly trying to find ways to get the government out of the way of business. And most all of you know that he is a constitutional scholar, and he firmly believes in the genius of the Constitution and its intent to be the chains that bind a government to not oppress its people. He mentioned in there the CFPB, that's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That is an example of Government regulation run amok. The CFPB was spawned out of Dodd-Frank and the financial crisis, and essentially what this was a $500 million government bureaucracy with zero congressional oversight. $500 million of our taxpayer money, and they could do pretty much whatever they wanted. To the extent there were some smaller financial institutions, some smaller financial industries that they were literally going after at the insistence of the Justice Department to put them out of business. Well, what Senator Cruz did was he made sure that now the CFPB has to go through the appropriations process. See, what that means is, before then, they were automatically going to have their budget renewed. It didn't have to go before Congress to get approved. And now, I think we can all agree that our federal government and our Congress doesn't always exercise its power of the purse the way we would like them to. But at least now, the CFPB, thanks to the leadership of Senator Cruz, has to go through the appropriations process. And if they are acting like the rogue, unconstitutional bureaucracy that they have at this point, then Congress can say, we will not fund your agency if you continue with this. At least there's some sort of oversight and there's some sort of leverage there to keep them in check. Those are the things that Senator Cruz is going to constantly fight for. Next, before I get into the questions and just kind of a look ahead at what we're trying to do, I want to give you all a little bit of a background of how I came to stand before you. And some of you may have heard this. I know Cindy has. But I spent 2/3 of my career self-employed, signing the front of my check. I told y'all, some of you, I grew up in Sulphur Springs. I'm a 6th generation East Texan. I did my undergraduate studies at Stephen F. Austin State University. I have an MBA from SMU. And I've been in Tyler as a real estate business owner for about 12 years. I told y'all how I met Senator Cruz. After he got elected, I got a call from John McClellan, who's now working on the campaign side. He was on he was our outreach director on the federal staff before he did that. And he called me up after the senator won and said, hey, we're looking for a regional director. And y'all, I was like, what in the world's a regional director? I didn't know. And he told me, and I said, well, we need to find somebody with, these certain attributes, business-minded, very East Texas focused. Y'all know, now I know y'all are from South Dakota, but you probably figured out pretty quick that East Texans were very relational, we're very personal, we're going to want to know about you. We're a type of people, you have to understand East Texans. And I said, it would help if we had somebody that had some business acumen. And obviously they had to be very conservative. And John kind of laughed. He said, well, I'm going to be honest with you, this is a bit of a fishing expedition. He said, would you even consider it? Now, y'all, at the time, I'm sitting there, this was 3 years ago, so my daughters, who are now full-blown teenagers, I just got one driving, so I covet all of your prayers. I've got a 16-year-old and in May, a 15-year-old. And I was running 3 businesses at the time. I was working on my MBA, commuting back and forth to Dallas, and now I'm getting asked if I want to go work for the government. And I said, well, I don't know. But then I thought about it, and like I told y'all earlier, what I had seen in Ted Cruz, what I had heard, and the consistency with which I watched him deliver his message, and then also behind those closed doors, when I got to know him man to man as an individual, whenever I got to know Raphael, and realize his humility, his intelligence, his love of this country, and his love and understanding of the Constitution, then all of a sudden I decided, what an incredible honor to get to, and this is how I describe my job, I get to play a very small supporting role in his very, very big work. But here's the other cool thing about it too. Having always been in the private sector, and having never done anything like this, and by God's grace I was blessed enough to be able to put myself in a position to be able to say yes to this role. Because let me tell you something, working for you all with Senator Cruz is an absolute honor. It has been one of the highlights of my adult life. And so I'm very blessed to have been able to accept this position. But I always tell people, when they would ask me, if gatherings like this or one-on-one, hey, what if he goes to D.C. and he starts to compromise or sell out, or, go along to get along? I said, well, then I won't be here as your regional director anymore. Or now you're state outreach director. I'll go back to the private sector. I didn't need this job. I wasn't looking for a job. This is a privilege and an honor. But I do it, and I'll tell you this, there's no other elected official that I would have rearranged my life to do this for. It is because of Ted Cruz and the leadership that he has exercised. And it's funny. I told him one time after he had been in the Senate for a little while, and I said, I think the biggest problem is, I said, leadership in Congress has been about as recognizable as an East Texas snipe in my lifetime. I don't know if y'all have ever seen a snipe. I haven't seen one yet. I've been on a snipe hunt, but I've never found that snipe, not yet. I said, and then all of a sudden you come along. I said, I think they didn't recognize the leadership. But I'm telling y'all, it gives me hope. I mean, watching Nancy Reagan and those green t-shirts that say just say no, by the way, I never touched a drug in my life. And it was very simple. I thought, you know what, I was little, I wasn't old enough to vote for Reagan, but he was my president as a young man growing up. And I remember just thinking, well, if they're making this big to-do about just say no, those drugs must be pretty bad. So I'm one of those guys that Just Say No program, I remember it in my elementary schools. But it should give you hope that you have a senator that looked at Ronald Reagan as the model of what an American president should be. Conservative principles that are unyielding. I'll wrap up with this quick statement because I love it. Because I got this question a lot whenever the talk was coming about whether or not the senator was going to run for president or not. And, guys like me and Daniel, we always had to be real coy, like, well, we don't know what's going on, no. And we didn't. We were the last to know. We were just like y'all. But I get the question a lot, as I'm sure y'all hear your friends and neighbors say often as part of a presidential campaign. Well, how is he going to get those folks in the middle? What's he going to compromise on to get to the middle? And I kind of chucked when I said, you don't understand Ted Cruz. And by the way, it's not about not compromising. It's about fully articulating conservative principles. The principles that are rooted in our Constitution, that are rooted in our founding. It's articulating why liberty and freedom works. It's articulating why the American experiment has left us as the lone superpower because of it being a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. I said Ted Cruz is going to articulate that. And the beautiful thing about it, unlike Democrats, conservatives don't look at the American populace in little blocks. Old, young, black, white, gay, straight. We don't do that. We don't do building blocks. Instead, like Reagan did, he took a message to the people that applied to all Americans. And that's how Ted Cruz believes you should address the American people, as all Americans, in this together. I had the privilege to, now I will be quiet, I got to tell you about this one thing. Right now, it is, the rest of the world is watching America. And you know what? To listen to our president, you would think they all kind of look at us with disdain, because he set the tone very early on that he was the one that was going to go heal our reputation. He was going to go right all the wrongs of America abroad. I just had a lunch 2 weeks ago at the residence of the Consul General, which a Consul General is basically like a junior ambassador. They're in all the big cities. And the Consul General of Spain hosted a lunch for myself and Daniel's counterpart, Jessica Hart, in Houston. And represented there were Italy, Spain, Mexico, Peru, Guatemala, China, and Mexico, and Germany. And so I took it as an opportunity. Now, they were grilling me. They want to know what in the world is going on with this election. We don't understand. So I got to tell them about how we ended up with the two-party system and George Washington's warning against it and how it's, kind of the way it's all evolved. And I got to discuss the Second Amendment with them. And by the way, it was really fascinating because the gentleman from Peru, he brought it up. And when I took them back to the fact that he had won our freedom, he was entrenched in our American psyche because we were a people that had farmers with muskets that literally took on the greatest empire ever known to man and fought for their freedom and won. So you're not getting our guns. And when I told them that story and how far it went back and what it meant to us, which was something different than people understand, they all were like, we get it. And as a matter of fact, a couple of the other representatives from other countries, diplomats, they said, we've absolutely believed in an armed populace. That was fascinating. But the greatest comment came from the gentleman from Germany. Because I asked all of them, I said, what do you, in your countries, how do y'all view America's involvement around the world? Internationally, what do you think right now we're doing? One of them said, not enough. They long for America to be the leader of the free world. And the gentleman from Germany, he said, we in Germany still firmly believe America is the indispensable nation. We must have a strong America. And for me, someone who has never in his life been at a table of diplomats like that, to listen to the admiration that what our founding fathers started and what Ted Cruz fights every single day of his life to defend was nothing short of remarkable. It made me so proud. So let me tell you something. I have hope. We've got the Reagans coming up, the children of the Reagan era. I mean, look, regardless of what your views are on them and where they've gone, and we disagreed and agree with them, but Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, you know, all these guys, Senator Sachs, these are individuals that grew up watching Ronald Reagan. And I am encouraged. It's a tough time right now. But I guarantee you, your senator will continue to fight tooth and nail for conservative principles. He won't back down. Y'all seen that? Now, I haven't talked much about the other role, because the beauty of it is, Daniel and I have seen behind the scenes, we know how he's treated amongst his colleagues. We know that there's members of the United States Senate that won't even so much as say good morning to him. And it's not that he doesn't care. It's that he just will not yield. You all, every one of you, mean infinitely more to Ted Cruz than any other senator that he has to sit down and deal with on a daily basis. And many of you may never, ever meet him in person. And those folks he sees every day. But I guarantee you, he always operates as though he's going to end the day and sit across the table from you and answer for his actions. Answer to you, not them. I've seen it, I've watched it, and I couldn't be more proud of it. So, that's what's going on in the Senate. That's a little bit of an editorial on a first-hand account of the Senator Cruz that I've worked with and had the pleasure of serving. So, what questions do you all have?
I've got a mic, I'll pass around if you have questions.
And having been a city councilman and thus a recovering politician, I can tap dance and dodge your questions so well you wouldn't believe it. No, but seriously, if you do ask me something I don't have the absolute answer, I'll just say I don't have the answer. And the way I know that it's one that I shouldn't answer is it means that I haven't either heard verbatim the senator say it, or I haven't read it from our policy team. But it doesn't mean I won't get you the answer. I just want you to always make sure you get Ted Cruz's answer, not Jason Wright's answer, because mine doesn't mean a hill of beans. It has to be his, and I want it to be accurate for y'all. So, yes, sir.
I was just curious why the people that had dropped out of the presidential race were still on the ballot.
That's just, I don't know. That's just the way it works. I think and that's why you hear them say they suspend their campaign, which basically means they're going to stop campaigning, but once you've gone through the process of getting on the ballot, I don't think, unless you could probably do something to go and proactively have your name removed, but they just don't do that. So, I don't know. Yes, sir.
Jason, have you ever had a conversation with Ted regarding the TPP, the Trans-Pacific, can't think of the last word.
Trans-Pacific Partnership, yes, sir.
Yeah. And if so, what's his position on it? What's he doing to fend it off?
So the Senator has not come out with a public statement as of yet on TPP specifically. You know, one of the biggest problems we had with the other trade agreements that were proposed is that when you hear fast track on anything, here's what it means. Fast track means that you will have a simple up or down vote on something. So let's say that a Democrat president goes and negotiates a deal with one of the partners, okay? When it comes to a vote in the Senate, it wouldn't be like a typical situation where you had to have a supermajority or amendments could be added, which is the critical piece of that. No amendments can be added. So therefore, if you had a Democrat president making a deal and a Democrat Senate, whatever the agreement is, however it's written, it would go straight to the Senate for a straight up or down vote, and if the Democrats have the vote, then that partnership or that trade agreement would pass through. So that's some of the things that has given the Senator heartburn in the past on the partnerships we've talked about. As it relates to TPP, if that's the situation, then he's going to continue to have problems with it. But right now our legislative team is looking at it, and we don't know all the details of TPP at this point. But those are the things we're going to look at, and that's why just as kind of a heads up that y'all need to look for. Senator Cruz often talks about the Washington tricks and the games that are played. So what you'll hear is, well, it's fine. There's no problem because what we're going to do, any agreement that the president might strike, it'll have 72 hours or whatever the case may be for the American people to look at it and for everybody to read it and see if they agree with it or not. Well, guess what? If there's a piece in there, if there's a foreign government that says, as a result of this agreement, we want to alter immigration policy for us, we want a higher quota of our workers to be able to go to America as part of this deal. If that's in there, then Ted Cruz can't write an amendment to attach to it that says, in no way will this agreement change current immigration law. So you've got to retain that right and that ability to do it. So remember, whenever you hear, well, everybody needs to read it first before it ever goes into action, ask the question. If you're talking to, which, Louis Gohmert's going to be, we can trust Louis on this, I think it's safe to say, but if you happen to be somewhere else and somebody asks you about it and they say, well, you know what, this shouldn't be anything to worry about, say, well, let me ask you this. Can you add an amendment to any agreement that the president strikes with one of the foreign partners? And most of them go, well, I don't know. I suppose you could. It's just like any other. And then you can go back to them and you can go, no. That's what fast track means. It's fast track because it does not go through the amendment process that you would with any other form of legislation.
As a Tea Party member, and we just, the people here, they are very much diehard, which is good. We still, when we go out to talk to people about how they're going to vote or we elect to who we support and everything, and there's an awful lot here that go door to door and do talk to them. And I guess the most recent thing is that watching the debates, and I had recorded it last week, I guess it was, but when I got home I looked at it and I thought, well, I didn't care much for the back and forth questions that was going on. And as far as Trump is concerned and everything, and of course Rubio and other counterpart, but it's hard to when they go up and lower themselves sometimes to, we'll say, to Trump's level or whatever, that it's hard to go up and try to explain to someone that, well, these are, he's just, trying to hold his ground and everything. But I guess what I'm saying is that it's just, we just have worked really hard putting a lot of Republicans in a place where they can do certain things, but we have so many rhinos, even in Texas, that the money does work in many ways, but I guess it's just when we try to keep the rhinos out, it's really hard. And I guess what it comes down to is that we just, I'm firmly for Cruz, and I know that pretty much everyone here is. But, and someone said, well, what happens if Cruz doesn't win? And we said, well, we wouldn't like to think that, but again, it's, most of the answers I hear is, I'll hold my nose and vote. So that's, I guess that's where we're at, is that we'll work hard and we'll continue to work hard.
Well, let me tell you this, and that's good to hear you say that, because, and remember, I started out just like you all. You know, I was one of the guys that helped found Grassroots America with the People with Joanne Fleming. I was on the first board of directors. I did the door knocking. I did the conservative activism. I did going door to door, trying to get people to understand the value and and how critical local government is. And I can tell you that's one of the things why probably those of you who are behind Senator Cruz are behind him, because you see that he truly understands. The reason why I became the first East Texas Regional Director, and Daniel has the job as East Texas Regional Director now, there was not an office here for Kay Bailey Hutchison. Senator Cornyn had one, but Senator Hutchison did not. And Ted Cruz realized, as y'all seen, he realizes that the grassroots are our army of constitutionalists. That's who is going to carry the day when it's all said and done. And that's why he demanded we've got to have a regional office in East Texas, because we are a people that get out and fight and work and will put the boots on the ground to defend the conservative cause. Now, as it goes forward, I can tell you, there's nothing more frustrating than me having to sit there and listen to a man who I know without a shadow of doubt has never told me a lie. He has the utmost integrity. And I'll tell any of y'all right here and now, I would charge a hill over burning coals and broken glass, barefooted, behind Ted Cruz any day of the week and twice on Sunday. And let me tell you something, being a fellow East Texan, you must have done something right if you're going to get me to make that kind of comment, because you know what? I'm not a follower, and integrity is everything. And my father always taught me that your word is your bond. That's how I was raised. And I'll also say this about Ted Cruz, though, as it relates to some of the comments and the interaction that go on in the other presidential race. He's the same guy in that race that he is in the Senate. He's going to tell the truth, and sometimes the truth is repelling. Darkness tries to flee from the light, but it cannot. And Ted Cruz, I'll tell you right now, he's not the type of guy that puts a bushel basket over his light. He is going to shine it, he's going to shine it bright, and he will not stop. One of the things that the senator said as it relates to talking about less than conservative individuals in either Congress or the Senate, one of the striking things about the whole issue with Senator McConnell that he found himself in when he took to the Senate floor. And he discussed where Senator McConnell had not kept his word to the senator. What was fascinating and sad for both me personally, but the senator said to him, he said, wasn't it striking that the argument wasn't whether or not he had been lied to, but the whole discussion in the headline became the fact that he had called someone out for being less than truthful with him. That's a problem. What should cause people to get up in arms is the fact that there was a bad deal, that was less than honest, that it wasn't a negotiation in good faith. That should be the case, and that's what Senator Cruz is going to continue to fight. And if y'all, there's the guy, I'm telling y'all probably heard Rafael Cruz speak. You know, one of the things, it's the way I was raised. You know, you don't repay evil for evil. You're not going to hear Senator Cruz talk ill of somebody on a personal attack, on a personal level. But let me tell you something. That does not restrain him from stating fact. If what you're saying is not right, if it's incorrect, he will call you on it. If what you're saying and what you are wanting to put forward is contrary to the Constitution, he will call you on it. You know, whenever Senator Feinstein got so ruffled early on in his Senate career discussing the Second Amendment, I'm telling y'all, there is nothing in Senator Cruz's makeup or DNA that wanted to be in any way disrespectful to the senior senator. Not one thing. It's not how he is. But that's not going to stop him from, as a very good litigator and a very good attorney, one who is steeped in the Constitution, bringing to bear the argument. Well, if you're going to start tinkering with the Second Amendment, could you apply the same principles to the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment? Now, that's not being mean and nasty. That's being a good constitutional defender. And so I can just tell you that Senator Cruz, as this continues to go on, and it is a nasty race, and I tell you what, I sit there, all of us on staff, we grit our teeth, we're sitting there texting back and forth, can you believe that, can you believe that, because we know the man. But he's not going to shy away from calling wrong, wrong, and defending what is right. So, and please, to hear you say that y'all are the workers, y'all, please don't lose heart. Don't lose heart. I haven't. I'm not ready to just go back and say, you know what, the heck with it. Forget this government stuff. I'm going back to the private sector. I'm going to make as much money as I can. I'll retire. I'll raise my girls. I'm not doing that. We can't. The stakes are too high. And those of you who are looking around this room, I mean, my goodness, the lives you've led and what you've paid into this incredible nation, please, please don't, because you have more wisdom, you have more insight than you could ever put a price tag on. So I encourage you, please keep fighting the fight, because I guarantee you, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, Senator Ted Cruz is going to keep doing it every day. Whether it's as our president or whether it's as our senator, he will constantly fight to defend freedom. I'll never forget one time, one of the first conversations I ever had with him after he got elected. He said, you know, Jason, he said, I knew I wanted to do this when I was 10 years old. Let me tell you something. Here's what's cool about it. You hear all the negatives about politicians. You hear about their ulterior motives. You hear about the fact that they want to, if they can just get high enough, if they get elected, then they can go to K Street and they can make a ton of money. Well, folks, I don't know about y'all, but at 10 years old, I wasn't thinking about K Street. I wasn't thinking about being able to wield power. No, this is a guy that listened to a father that told him every day the virtues of this great nation, why he escaped here, why he risked death, and that story that you've all heard about, coming over here with $100 sewn in his underwear. Senator Cruz listened to that day in and day out, day in and day out, and at 10 years old, he set upon a mission to professionally defend the Constitution from the halls of Congress. And he did it. There's no ulterior motive. That's it. That's it for him. So.
Next question.
Yes, sir.
You need the mic.
Sir, I don't know if anyone has thought of this. Immediately when it happened, I thought something was afoul. And I'm talking about Scalia, our Supreme Court Justice, being, in my opinion, politically assassinated. And I wonder, since he was a good friend of Senator and possibly President of the United States, Senator Ted Cruz, is he going to investigate this or pursue it? And I have an article by The Enquirer magazine, who nobody, really thinks much of, but they're not all just a bunch of hooey. And they feel it's a political assassination. And Roger Stone, who wrote the book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, I read the book. It's about Lyndon Johnson, whom I always believed from a freshman in college when I saw him with the Kilgore Ranger Reds. He scared me just looking at me. The man was evil, in my opinion. Do you think Senator Cruz will pursue something on this matter with Scalia and try to investigate it? Because it was really hushed up real quick.
I have heard nothing to that effect, sir, and I have not heard any comments about there being foul play or anything like that. What I will tell you that Senator Cruz is dead set on doing is making sure that we do everything within our power to make sure that we get someone as conservative, as firm of a constructionist as Justice Scalia on the court again, and he will do everything in his power. And if he is president, I'll tell you one thing he will absolutely do is make sure to appoint someone who wants to adhere to the rule of law, defend the Constitution, and not try to legislate from the bench. That I can guarantee you, because those are the things I know. On the elements of foul play with Justice Scalia, I've heard nothing about that, sir. So I can't really answer to it. But I'd love to look at what you have, that you found, just for my information, I'll pass it.
No, I haven't found anything.
Oh, I thought you meant you'd read an
It's
article.
just my opinion.
Okay.
Inquirer magazine.
Yeah, okay. Well, I have not heard anything.
Conspiracy theory.
Gotcha. I haven't heard anything on this.
On March 1st, the American Bar Association made a request that the UN Treaty on the Rights of the Child be ratified. This has come up on numerous occasions, and then it doesn't pass, and then it gets brought up again. That's the first time I've heard the American Bar Association make the request. Do you know what is happening with that, and whether it's going to? I feel confident that Senator Cruz will choose to vote against it, because he has in the past. But do you know anything about it, or whether it will move through?
No, ma'am, I have not specifically. I know what you're talking about, but I have not heard specifically on anything from our legislative team and what action the senator may take on that. But you're right, as you know, when it comes to the UN, that's not unfamiliar for the senator to make sure to defend the United States' sovereignty as it relates to the UN. So I don't have anything specific on that case.
Okay, round two.
Jason, I just want to probe you for a moment to try to get a sense for the level of awareness that the Senator has of the United Nations Agenda 21.
He's fully aware of it, as am I, and as is our entire staff.
Is he also aware of the
Which, real quick, Mike, as a city councilman, obviously, that's something I had to deal with on a first hand. I know all about having to strike down overlay districts and urban forestry and some of the way. Yes, sir, fully aware of it.
Okay, you're the first person I've met that could really answer that question with any clarity.
Yeah,
But is he following the progression of it, the deployment of it? Is he deeply aware of the insidious tactics that are being used on local governments, like the government of Longview?
100%. He is absolutely focused on it. One of the things that Senator Cruz, as it relates to Agenda 21, you're talking about more than anything, a private property right issue. What it is, it's an overreach. It started at the genesis with the United Nations coming into America as a way to control populations and private property right infringement. And so the senator, being obviously a very, very adamant supporter of private property rights, is fully aware of Agenda 21, and we're always vigilant for that. And those of us who have been in local government, we make sure that it stays. And that's the thing, that's the beauty of having served in local government, that you know the ramifications. I had to vote, great example, in Tyler, one of the things that, one of the biggest votes that I took was out where I lived. It was in my district. You had what used to be kind of a town and country setting, okay? And so, but now it had become a main artery of Tyler. It's Cumberland Road in Tyler, Texas. Y'all go out there and see it's mostly very large, beautiful homes. Well, many of those homeowners wanted to make sure that their property was protected. And so they wanted to make it an overlay district. Now, the Interior Department maintains that a home must be 50 years or older before it can be registered. And then if you want to go and register your house with the National Registry and make it a historical home and get the plaque and go before the Historical Preservation Board before you make any changes to your windows or anything like that, you're fully free to do that. But this was something different. This was putting an overlay over an area where some of the people that live there, they're like, we don't want this. This is not something we want. Because what they would do is they would say that whenever you sold your house, you could not divide your parcel of land into more than 2 pieces or 3 pieces. And so one of the homeowners there, he owned 15 acres. If he ever wanted to doze his house and subdivide it, it's his land. He's free to do that. But what they were about to do is they were about to come along, and what they wanted to do is make sure that their homes would always look like they wanted and that their neighbors would always look the way they wanted. And so, and it was a derivative of this sort of thinking, of taking areas and manipulating and making you as a free landholder have to go before an unelected group of individuals to say, can we please change our roof out for this color? Or can we please make this room addition? You shouldn't have to do that unless you're going against deeds and covenants of some sort. Then you should be able to do with your property as you please. And so I had to, and I stood up and I fought it, we won. And so, but people, and it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? I mean, if you, for those who don't know better, whenever you start to hear these issues, they sound fantastic because you'll see maps and pictures of beautiful walking trails and hiking trails, and you know, it's just all, it's very enticing stuff. But you got to get that, you got to dig down and figure out, okay, what does it do to the individual property owners' private property rights? And that's one of the things the senator takes extremely seriously. So, very important.
Next question. Here we go.
In my attempt to be politically active, I've had difficulty in finding the truth. There's so much misinformation and misleading things being said out there. Have you got any suggestions on how to winnow out the truth from everything that's flying out there? And one thing that I have learned from Trump is that anger makes people lose their intelligence. Because if you listen to what Trump is saying, there's no way you could vote for him.
Here's what, I can just tell you what it's anecdotal. This is what I do, guys. When I go up against, especially if it's, like whenever I told y'all I went to graduate school at SMU, smart people, and a lot of them were liberals. And immediately, once they found out who I worked for, well, I get judged and sized up really quickly. You say you work for Ted Cruz, oh my gosh, you're one of those scary Republicans. And when you get into a conversation with them, I encourage all of you, go read Basquiat, go read Hayek, go read The Wealth of Nations, go read Adam Smith, go read Plato's Republic, go to the Hillsdale website and take their free courses. And that way, whenever you have an elected official, obviously check their voting record, check their speeches, find out what they said when they were, if they're now in the Senate, try to find out what they were doing before that, when they were in their state house. What did they stand up and fight for? What does their record show? And then whenever you have this philosophy developed by reading Jefferson and understanding Jeffersonian democracy, understanding the founding of our nation, understanding why it worked and continues to work when it's recognized, when we restrain. When you can understand the genius of the American experiment, when you can tell somebody, because a lot of people don't know this, whenever you can sit down and you can, in an educated way, and you hear a politician infringing on this because you know that what we have in America is something that the world had never seen before. For a government to be formed in which it said, here, it's yours, it's for you, it was created by representatives of you, it's yours. The idea of self-governance was foreign. It had always been a monarchy, an emperor, a tyrant, pressed down. The people existed to serve whoever was at the top. It wasn't until, and this is kind of one of the analogies I love to give. One of my favorite movies of all time is Gladiator. If y'all haven't ever seen it, please go watch it. And Maximus, who's talking to one of the senators who's been arrested and who's conspiring to help him gain his freedom, because Maximus, once a military general, has now been sold into slavery and he's made his way back. And I'll never forget this. The senator asked Maximus, he says, so, you're telling me, once all of Rome is yours, you'll just give it back? Now that was fiction. That entire story was fiction. But the American experiment started, or really it's somewhere it started, but one of the most incredible pieces of our history is whenever George Washington, the first military leader ever to lead a major revolution, upon doing so, yielded his sword and basically said, I've done what my countrymen asked me to do. And then whenever they tried to make him a monarch, he couldn't believe it. He was furious. No. Unheard of. That's America. So I would tell you, if you ever hear anybody, always test what it is they're trying to sell you on or pose to you, no matter how wonderful it may feel and no matter how much it might positively impact your life. Always say, where can I find justification for this in the Constitution?
That's right.
If you can't find it, you got a problem with whoever's proposing it. And that's another thing, when it comes to Senator Cruz, those three things that I told you about: less spending, tax reform, and regulation reform, lower regulations. And no matter what, everything that comes before Senator Cruz, it's always going to have to face this one litmus test: the Constitution. Does the Constitution allow us to do what we're trying to do? Or is there something in the Constitution that explicitly stops what the government's trying to do? And if so, let's stand on that. Let's shout that. Let's put that under the microscope and say the Constitution reads like this, and what you're doing cannot be justified in here. So I would tell you the best thing, that's why Thomas Jefferson believed in an educated populace. He believed in the public school system. Unlike anywhere else, let's face it, back before the Reformation, keep the people ignorant, and that way they'll have to believe. Now, the only thing they know is what you tell them and what you allow them to know. Mm-hmm. We have certain individuals, we have certain political folks that they would love to keep people as ignorant as they could for as long as they can. Mm-hmm. Don't do that. Go read and figure out, because I'll tell you, here's why I say that. It's not because Jason Wright has it all figured out, because I absolutely do not. But I know this. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, all of them, James Madison, the way they figured this out is they read and they read and they read. They looked at what worked, they looked at what didn't work. And what they the main conclusion they all came to is the best government, the best way for the human experience to thrive is through liberty and freedom. And once you grasp that, you understand where that came from and how this nation was shaped, you'll win every argument. And as far as the conspiracy theories, as far as whenever, you hear a politician say something about this elected official or that elected official, I tell you it's the same thing that Ted Cruz says. You shall know them by their fruits. Mm-hmm. Ted Cruz has his fingerprints all over conservatism in the last 3 years. Everywhere there's been a major battle in the United States Senate in defending the Constitution, in defending our rights, in defending liberty, and standing up for liberty, regardless of the outcome. There he was. He was in the arena fighting. Look for those people. Find out where they were during the biggest fights. And then, go with your gut.
Amen.
Good?
Anyone else? A couple more, okay.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm a veteran, and I'm
Thank you, sir.
very concerned about I'm very concerned about how veterans are being treated, mm-hmm. and how in the world, same way with the IRS, how in the world people can work and not get fired, mm-hmm. and do what they do to us. And how many people have been fired over the veterans thing? How many veterans died because they were standing in line? Right. IRS. I got a notice from the IRS last year, and that was right after I had done something and spoken up somewhere and everything, mm-hmm. and I got something kicked back from the IRS. And so again, it's just something that it's just you wonder sometimes what carries Trump, and Trump is basically feeding on the fears of myself and I'm sure others, but we do, it is a concern.
Let me tell you what Senator Cruz demands of us, and I've had these meetings, and it's interesting whenever you call up one of the agencies, and that's the thing, and a lot of times people don't realize this, but all the agencies, whether it's the Veterans Administration, the Internal Revenue Service, the EPA, they operate independently. And as a senator, you can't just kind of roll up on them and start dictating what they should and should not do. But what you can do, and what Senator Cruz demands that we do, first of all, if you as a veteran call our office, as a veteran, we have an incredible casework team. Joyce Sibley, who's in our Austin office, she supervises our casework team. She's been in the Senate for over 30 years. And I guarantee you, she gives a report every single week to the Senator, the cases we're working, what's the status, what's going on. And then here's another thing that Senator Cruz has demanded that we do is outreach to them. I'll go proactively ask. I was at a VISN meeting, which VISN is basically the network that takes care of you guys to figure out where the hospitals should be, how do you best serve different regional areas, right, for the veterans. Now, whenever they get a phone call from me, usually they start getting all tense, like, oh my gosh, Ted Cruz is running for president, here's one of his guys, what in the world is this about? And I tell them real quick, look, this is not adversarial, this is so we can partner with you as a Senate office. We want to see what can we do to help, to make whatever's within our power to make the lives better for those who serve. We want to do that. And we don't want to always react. I don't want to get to your issue whenever you call me and you've had to wait 4 years to either get a hip replaced or get reimbursed for mileage because you had to drive from one facility to the next, and you had to run around, and now you're at your wit's end, and you're calling me, and then we all react, and we don't have those contacts over there. So what Senator Cruz demands is that we outreach, and we try to figure out, okay, who can we go to within the agencies to help our vets out? And when you work with them, and they know that you're not adversarial and you're trying to fix things, it works a lot better. And that's what we do. You know, I mean, the bottom line is for us as a Senate office, there's only certain things within our little circle of influence that we can do. And one of those is to reach out to the agencies. And that makes it a lot easier. Whenever I do have a veteran issue, like I took my caseworker that handles our Veterans Affairs, Chris Robles. I took him with me to this meeting in Arlington, Texas to visit. And we sat down with 6 administrators and we said, we're not here to do anything other than figure out what's going on, what are y'all working on, and how can we help? And if we ever have an issue with one of our veterans that comes asking Senator Cruz for help, please, we want to know that we can work together. You know? And it just makes it a lot better. And that's what Senator Cruz demands. Take care of our folks. That's at the end of the day, regardless of all the headlines, regardless, you know, this job and what, as a U.S. Senator or whatever, it's not all about, you know, it's the headlines and all that. It's about taking care of Texas. It's representative government. That's what it is. And so that's how we're trying to handle it, to make sure that things get better, is to proactively work with the agencies and say, hey, are y'all doing this and how can we help support your efforts? Got one there and then one here and then.
Another movie I wanted to bring up that I encourage everybody to watch. It's 1,000 times if necessary. And that's Braveheart.
Amen. It's one of our staff favorites.
This is one of my favorite line in this movie is when he told Robert the Bruce, men follow courage, not titles.
Amen.
And I think that's where Senator Cruz is. He went up to Washington, D.C., and he didn't have a whole lot of friends amongst his fellow senators. And he shook up a lot of people. He shook them up pretty good. And I think he'll do that as president. It might not be very popular, but we, you know, myself, I can't afford not to be involved in seeing and trying to see him get elected. Because you see, I have my father almost lost his life in Peleliu Islands in Guantanamo. He's an old breeding Marine Corps, and I'm retired. So we got too much. There's too much to lose in just to, as you put it, to just go back to the private sector and just not do, you know, just live, make as much money as you can, and then go on.
Yep.
I talk to a lot of guys where I work that have that kind of attitude, and all I can tell them is this: you got grandchildren, you know, or maybe great grandchildren, they're going to have to live with whatever comes up.
That's right.
Whatever the people today decide on who's going to run the country. And you watch the movie Braveheart. I love it when he went up there. He said, "I'm going up there to pick a fight."
That's right.
Because that's what he was. He was freedom, a Scottish freedom fighter. I don't know how many people have heard of him. He's one of the greatest, you know, freedom fighters that history's ever put out. And he died for it.
That's right. That's right. No, that's one of ours there for the first year, like especially right before the senator gave us 22-hour force speech. I mean, we have Braveheart clips going around all the time. I mean, that's one of our absolute favorites. So, amen. Yes, sir. One more, and then we'll wrap it up. Yes, sir.
I'm also a veteran. I'm a disabled veteran. I work with asbestos. I have 100% disability. The Veterans Administration gets such a bad rap, it isn't for me. I'm going to tell you, it's the best medical treatments I've ever had.
Fantastic. It's good to hear those stories.
I just needed a knee replacement earlier this year. I said something to them within a week, they had me in the hospital on top of it, a knee replacement.
Fantastic.
So the VA has improved now, I'm sure that the horror stories used to be.
Right. Good. It's good to hear the good stories. Okay. Folks, quality over quantity. Y'all have been an amazing, quality crowd, and it's been an honor to be with y'all tonight. I work for you. Daniel works for you. He's just right over in Tyler. If y'all need us, call on us. Thank you for letting us serve you. God bless y'all. Thank you.